cross. So it was on the eastern bank of the Jordan River, just before, that was 40 years after they were actually supposed to invade the Promised Land. What were you doing what were you doing 40 years ago? So you can't even remember because you're too young. 40 years. Now they're actually going to do this. And this morning, I want to talk to you about mission progress. This is a mission that God has called his people to. And progress on his mission is not going to look like progress that if you had been among the Hebrews in that day would have expected. So look with me at chapter 7 in verses 22 through 24. And secondarily, I want you to think about your mission, right? We are also walking by faith. You are also on a mission. Your mission is the Great Commission. And it's to grow in grace in the Lord Jesus Christ. And don't be surprised if your mission does not look like what you thought it should at this point. So looking at verse 22 of chapter 7. The Lord your God will clear away these nations before you. What's the next three words? Little by little. You will not be able to put an end to them quickly, for the wild beasts would grow too numerous for you. But the Lord your God will deliver them before you and will throw them into great confusion until they are destroyed. He will deliver their kings into your hand so that you will make their name perish from under heaven. No man will be able to stand before you until you have destroyed them. God was, and we're going to focus almost the entire time on one single verse. I hardly ever do that when I preach the Old Testament. But the longer I worked on this message, the more I was convinced that I couldn't get beyond one simple verse. And that verse is verse 22. And God, I think, is saying to them and to Bible readers over the generations, be careful not to measure progress on the mission your own way. God is leading them against the Canaanites. Progress may not look like you expect it should look. Now, how many of you have ever attempted something that was good and the progress didn't end up looking like you thought it would? The rest of you, are you awake? Yeah, right? If you've ever attempted anything for the Lord, you know what this is like. This is one of the reasons why the just must live by faith and not by their own plans. So you can see over 40 years, we're going to look right now, you're welcome to turn there with me if you want. I'm going to look at Exodus chapter 13 and verse 17 just for a moment. Keep your finger in the book of Deuteronomy, Exodus chapter 13 and verse 17. We're going to go back, so stay with me. Once you've found that, look up so you get a context here. We're going to go back 40 years to the original effort to conquer the Promised Land. So in going to Exodus 13, we've gone back 40 years. And I want you to see in this passage that it is humbling to see what mission progress is supposed to look like. And it's always been that way, and we can see that 40 years earlier in Exodus 13 and verse 17. Now, when Pharaoh had let the people go, God did not lead them by the way of the land of the Philistines, even though it was near. For God said the people might change their minds when they see war and return to Egypt. Look up, please. The way of the Philistines was the way that made sense. Did you ever get that? That was the shortest way to the Promised Land. If I laid a map out to you and showed you the road to Philistia, that would have been the pathway they would have traveled. Every one of the Hebrew, the children of Israel would have said, that's the way we got to go. Point A, guys, right? Point A, point B, as the crow flies, that's the directions I want. I don't want to do this roundabout stuff. So they would have all said, of course, this is the way we should go. And God said, now I'm going to humble your plans. Because what's making sense to you right now is not the way I'm going to direct you, and I'm actually going to give you a reason for it. Did you catch it? You want to go the fastest way. It probably, who knows if it would have taken 11 days or not. It would have been short. The problem is when you get to the end of that road and are about to cross into the Promised Land, you are going to face a group of people who are going to say, not on my watch. You're going to bump into the Philistines, and I'm telling you, as my people, God was saying to the children of Israel, you are not ready for this. You're not going to be ready for this for decades. If you face war against the Philistines, you will be defeated, and that is not progress. So you're not going to do that. Now, what do you suppose? Can you imagine when Moses had to go to the hundreds of thousands and millions of Hebrews? They just came out, they just crossed the Red Sea just recently at that point. And they're all fired up. Let's go to the promised land, right? Everybody's fired up about a project when it's early. And Moses has to go to them and say, I know you all want to go the short route, but I got to break some news to you. Not only are we not going to go on Route 77, right, the easy way, we're going to go the opposite direction. Try to sell that to God's people. They actually, rather than go north, as they crossed over into the Sinai Peninsula, God said south. You're going south. Now, the average Hebrew, you want to show me their facial expressions at this point? It's not the way I have it fit. That doesn't make sense to me. There is a travelable road right to the promised land. Why not? And then Moses had to explain to them, because God's definition of progress is humbling. It's not your definition. And if we do what you think we need to do, this whole mission will be aborted. In fact, you may not survive it. You're not ready for this. Did you see that? It was God in his mercy. Now, does God always say to us when we see something that's worthwhile doing, and we have scriptural principle behind it, and we start doing it, and God seems to redirect? He does this all the time. Read the book of Acts. If you don't think it happens in the New Testament, read it. Paul got redirected constantly. This way? No. This way? No. This way? Okay, yes. How frustrating that must be. It's humbling to follow the direction of God, isn't it? On his mission. But that's the definition of progress. So you have this long history. So God sends them instead. He sends them down south. Now stay with me. The progress of God's mission gets even more humbling. So, okay, we're going to head to, I don't know where we're going. There's a mountain down in that southern part of the Sinai Peninsula, and that mountain's called what? That's right, Mount Sinai. So they're all going to gather around this mountain. Okay, we're good, as long as this is not going to be too long. Months and months and months. Just around the mountain called Sinai. That doesn't make sense, God. This whole mission is not making sense to me. It's not going the direction we think it should go. It definitely is not going the speed that we think it should go. And whatever happened to this guy who's leading this whole thing up? Where is he? Up there? On that mountain? Is he coming right back? Weeks go by. Over a month goes by, and he's not back. Maybe he's dead. Can you see it? This is not making sense to us. We should already be in the promised land, and we're down the southern part of this desert waiting for our leader, and who knows if he's even alive right now. God has a way of taking the common sense directions that we think, and even good ones, guys. True? And saying, no, I'm going to teach you humbly some lessons of faith. Now, if you haven't experienced that, could we have coffee sometime? Just all the time, right? So he does this in the Old Testament and in the New Testament. All throughout the Bible, God's people must humble themselves and their ideas of progress on his mission. It still is, like the song goes, trust and obey. For there's no other way to get God's directions, and to be happy in Jesus, but to trust and obey. But that's little kid stuff. Yep. Always has been, right? It's always the way this has been. Progress in our own lives and other people's lives is never as fast as we want it. Can I give you some examples? School takes too long. It does. It takes long. And if you're a student, let me just tell you, teachers think the same thing. This is too long. What do you mean it's only winter break? It needs to be June. What do you mean I'm only in 7th grade? I'm only in 9th grade. I need to graduate and get on with things. It just takes long. It does. My next door neighbor, little guy, he's in elementary school. And I see him come out every once in a while, jump around on his trampoline, and I said, hey, how many more days before the end of school? You know, at this time of year, kids know. 7. Like, why can't it be over, right? But 7, now the encouraging thing is he's probably down to 5 now, the last time I asked him. It always takes long. It takes longer than you think. It's humbling when you think about it, right? Or how about those of you who are trying to drive? I know that we have a driver in our midst, and we had one not long ago become actually a couple awfully long ago become drivers. And for a lot of us, it just takes forever. Why can't, I mean, it's just a vehicle, right? How hard can this be? Get me in there, let me drive. But it takes so long. How about this? Finding a life's mate. I can count for you. I think I'd lose track of how many people, how many ladies, young ladies over the years, and young men who have said, I have tried and tried and tried. Is there anybody out there that's worthwhile dating? Right? Somebody's shaking their head. Yes, there is. Yes, there is. Yes, there is. Yeah. God has a plan, but it's humbling, right? I don't know how many of you know the name Lolo Jones. You ever heard that name? Lolo Jones? She's been forgotten. An Olympian about a couple of Olympics ago. And there was an article, just really gripping article. Born again Christian, as far as I can tell, she is totally unapologetic about Christ and about the Bible and about the Lord's direction in her life. She does not apologize for it at all. She is 39 years old and has had multiple opportunities to get married if she wanted to, but she's not. 39. She confided in media that she just again had to say, this is the end of the line between you and me to a guy after 8 months. 39 years old. 39 years old and maintaining her sexual purity all those years. She's got some serious questions right now. I mean, I love the fact that she's candid. God, where are you? 39 years. I've been walking with you for 39 years. Isn't there somebody out there for me? So if you're 17 or 20 or 25, don't sweat this, right? There are other people just like you trying to walk with the Lord. It just seems like it takes so long. Or how about health solutions? Getting some solutions to your health problems. It just seemed to, how many people we want to talk about tonight or this morning on that one, right? This one thing leads to another. I think of the dear friends of the Jacobs family. One thing after another. I think of Bob Kampf. One thing, and of course you, because you're like this, right? If he's going through it, you're going through it, right? 2 or 1. Yeah, it just seems to take long. Right, Mary Jean? It's a long time. And why can't this be over already? Or how about that person that you're trying to invest your life in, that you have prayed and prayed and prayed? Lord, won't you please change their lives? Now, listen, this is real. If you don't know what that's like, we need to talk. Your testimony needs to become public, so you're bumping into people like this and pouring your life into them. I went through my phone registry the other day, just looking for people's names. I kept noticing names of people that I'd shared the gospel with, and they've just dropped off the planet, or they stopped making progress. I can't explain it. Can you? Lord, why? Why does this take so long for it to see fruit in people's lives? And the pathway, even the pathway of progress, right, to the goal that you think is important is not one that you would and I would have chosen. How many different pathways has God? The Lord is my shepherd. I was thinking about that this morning. What a precious passage. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. Sometimes it doesn't feel like that, right? I mean, being in the desert land is something that we feel you feel very much. How about the goal? Now, we talk about the progress. You say, Pastor, I know what that's like. I can relate to that. Try this one. How about the very goal that you and I think is so important? It seems good. It seems like the right thing for us to shoot for. But is it possible that that goal may not be God's goal? Is that possible? Your mission is to find Mr. Right. Now, some of you young ladies are maybe too young to have to even worry about that right now. It certainly is on your mind, right? Your goal is to find Mr. Right, and you get acquainted with this guy, and you start thinking, I know it's not you, but somebody else who thinks like this. That somebody else thinks, maybe this is the guy. And you get yourself, or for guys, maybe this is the girl. And you get yourself emotionally invested in that person. You're thinking, oh, this looks so good. This looks like it's so real. And then, boom, something takes place. And you go, this is not him. This is not her. My goal maybe was not God's goal. Or how about when you get certain schooling? You know, I'm not supposed to be doing this right now. Did you know that? I have not been trained in my undergraduate years to do what I'm doing right now. I'm supposed to be a teacher. Did you know that? Is that horrors or what? I'm supposed to be saying, well, maybe you got to go find a teaching position. That is what I trained to be, a teacher. I have my undergraduate degree not in biblical studies, but in secondary education. I taught high school students and junior high students. And then it dawned on me, I know other people who've been called to preach who had exactly the same initial calling. A guy named Potter comes to mind right now. You ever heard of him? Another guy named Hobie, Kent Hobie, school teacher before he became a pastor. And you get yourself you're trained in certain ways. You go to trade school, you have all this experience, and then God seems to say, this will happen to somebody probably sitting here, or maybe already has. I'm not going to do that way. I'm going to change your goal. I'm going to actually use you this way, and the things you train for, watch how I use those over here, which you didn't plan for. Right? Can God do that? Just all the time, right? Or you pour yourself into that person we referred to before. You just, you have prayed for them. You want them to make spiritual progress. And the problem is they never got that memo. It never dawned on them that that you're actually trying to invest your life spiritually in them. And they're like a deer in the headlights. They're not there. But Lord, that was a good goal. Right? Doesn't mean that you have to be the one who accomplished that goal, right? Or you spend weeks in a hospital room. Whose goal is that, right? None of us, right? So here's a hint this morning. This might be one of the most valuable things that I say to you this morning, or maybe for a long time. Maybe, just maybe, in God's thinking, it was never first and foremost about the goal that you thought it should be about. Maybe that's really what's happening right now. Maybe it has always been in God's mind, his goal, to teach you to walk by faith and to be conformed to the image of Jesus Christ. Romans 8. God's mission takes more time than we have patience for sometimes. Does that ever happen to local churches? Just interview any pastor. It's taking too much time, right? I thought about this. I don't know this is being taught. Pastors, you need to have a class in patience in seminary. I don't know if that's being taught anywhere. Because it's not going to happen the way most of you think it's going to happen. I'm telling you. I know young pastors, I was never a young pastor. I was always an old pastor. But I know pastors who were told in seminary, this is the way it's going to look. This, and it's going to take off like this. And it gets even worse when you follow people who've been trained in the church growth movement. Right? Just push it aside and realize that God's goal might not be your goal, and it might go slower than what you think. So again, God defines the mission progress in the wilderness his own way. Let him do that. Sometimes he actually gives you a peek at the reason, and when he does, that's extraordinary mercy. He allows you to peek for a moment at the reason why it's not going the way you think it should. The reason why it's not going as fast as you think it should, or even in the direction you think it should. And why is it that I can't measure my progress by my watch and have to measure my progress instead by the calendar? Why? You parents appreciate that, right? Progress doesn't usually work on our schedule. Here's a glimpse of God's mercy. He told them the reason. Here's the reason why you're not going to make the progress that you think on the time schedule you think you ought to. The beasts are too numerous for you. Did he have to say that? The answer is what? No, he didn't. But in his mercy, he's allowing them to see this is not going to go the way you think it is. I know you're all fired up. You can't wait to get into the promised land. You all figure it's going to be by next week, and it's not going to be. And the reason why is because the beasts are too numerous for you. I didn't want you to go by the way of the Philistines because you're not going to make it there. Just trust me, all right? I know it's fast. And I know can you imagine the next generation? This is 40 years later. And the sons and the grandsons are standing on the east bank, and they're looking over here at Jericho and the rise above Jericho. And they're probably thinking, all right, if Caleb and Joshua were there, yeah, let's go. I just want you to know the reason why you're not there yet is because the beasts are too numerous for you. Now, what do we know about that? Jeremiah 49, verse 19. On Wednesday, I kind of gave you, see, Wednesday nights are great. I kind of tipped my hand a little bit on Wednesday night as to what this is about. Jeremiah 49, verse 19 suggests that in the Old Testament times, there were lions. Can you imagine that? In Israel, down by the Jordan River. Now, some of you have been to the promised land. Yeah, it still is the promised land, by the way. Some of you have been to Israel, and if you remember going down by the Jordan River, there is a certain strip there where you see a bunch of reeds. It's just very tall. And don't think of the Jordan River the way you see it today, because it was broad and rushing and wonderful. But in those reeds, probably were lions waiting for their prey. And God knew it. And they didn't. And you know what? God did not let the Canaanites take care of them. All the years that the Canaanites lived in the land, you got to picture this. These lions were a threat to their population. And I thought about that. This is probably part of God's correction and judgment on them. I'm not clearing them out for you. I'll clear them out when I got my people ready to come into the land. Now, how many of the children of Israel do you think were actually thinking, we'd like to go into the promised land, but Lord, could you go in and clear out the wild animals first? Nobody was thinking like that. It's a little bit like, us as young people, The thing about driving cars and such, I have to read a booklet on this? Why? How hard can this be? My pop showed me how to do this. Let's get in there. Let's drive it, practice a little bit. Let's go to the state troopers barracks and take the test. No, you need some preparation first. Just trust me. You need to. So the beasts are too numerous for you. That doesn't sound like progress. When God says, I had to slow you down and time this and it doesn't even tell us how he took care of them. It just says they will be taken care of. It is not progress for God to say, okay, on your timing, as fast as you want to, just rush across that river into the promised land, and sorry about the lions. So it was going slower than they expected it to. Why? Think about this. Because God saw issues in the progress on this mission that his people would have never guessed. And he had to slow it down. Slow it down was perfect timing. But for them, it was slowing it down. The mission was moving forward, and it looked like everything was going to be slowed down. Who is going to be okay with this? Probably those who are the just, who walk by what? Faith, right? That's what this is all about, is walking by faith. Now, it makes you wonder a little bit, doesn't it? Does it? I hope it does. Secondarily, it ought to make you wonder, from the youngest to the oldest, there's some good things that I'd really like to do, and some of them are such good things. I can point to chapter and verse, and I know God wants me to do these. Others they look like they're principally good things. But it just is not going as fast as I'd like it to go. And it might not be God saying, I just want you to give up on this. It might be God simply saying, on my time, not yours. I know about the wild beasts, and you don't know about them. Sometimes I tell you about the obstacles ahead of time. Sometimes I don't tell you about the obstacles ahead of time, but you don't need to know that. You just simply trust and obey. There's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. Sometimes God gives you an explanation as to why the progress seems slow. If God had never confided in his people, as he actually did in this passage, that there are beasts in the land I had to clear out, they would still have to simply follow him, follow his latest instructions. I don't know what you're facing. I do know this, that if you know Jesus as your Savior, and you have a living faith in Jesus Christ, you understand what it means to feel like something good in life has been placed on a holding pattern. You know what I mean? You guys out there? Good? Okay. Like you're in an airplane flying around the airport, you look down, we were overseas, those of us went to Israel. Coming back is wonderful. And there's just something, Cleveland can be exciting. It's home. But imagine, this long flight back from Israel after having been gone for days, and you're back, and you look out the window as you bank around Cleveland Hopkins, and you think, that's where I want to be. Can't you land this thing? That's where I want to be. Nope, sorry. Not time yet. There's a long traffic jam of 747s waiting to disembark all their people. You just have to wait and trust the pilot. There it is. Actually, wait and trust the air traffic controller. Which is a better illustration because he sees everything going on. And he knows when it's right to say, you, come on in. Right? Sometimes God gives no explanation at all. I don't know what you're facing. Progress, there's another phrase in here as we finish here this morning. That phrase is little by little. Did you see it? Oh. What New Testament saint can't appreciate the patience that's in those words? Little by little. I'm going to remove the problem. Out of mercy, I'll tell you what the problem is, but it's not going to get you into the promised land faster than what you want, or faster than I intended to. But you need to know this is all going to be little by little. I want you to think about that wonderful phrase. Not very exciting to hear that, friends, right? Little by little. But there's something about that phrase I want you to think about. God said, I'm not detouring you. I'm just giving you marching orders on my time. And it will be little by little. I'll remove these beasts from the land. The exact route that God wants you to go, some of you, by the way, some of these Hebrews were probably praying, God, please, show us the way into the promised land. Show us. And then they hit a speed bump like this. And God says, wild animals in the land, it'll be little by little. Can I ask you a question? Was God answering their prayer? Let me ask you this question. So you're praying for something that you know in the Word of God is important. I could think of our men's prayer meeting, the ladies, I'm sure, the same way. Praying for certain things that the next week it did not take place. The next month it did not take place. The next year it did not take place. 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. But little by little, God was actually answering the prayer of people praying here. Now, our problem is we want to see it all at one shot, right? All at one time. And God said, it is going to be little by little. I am answering your prayer. This is actually an evidence of me listening to you. Not that I'm not. The fact that I'm doing it little by little means I'm doing it, answering on my time. You simply have to walk by faith, right? Zechariah 4:10, I encourage you, it's one of my, in the Minor Prophets, one of my favorite verses, where the children, watch this, the children of Israel are allowed to come back into the land. Oh, how wonderful is this, right? We're back again. Things are really going to start happening now. We won't make the same mistakes that we made before. We're just so thrilled to be here. This is a desert. What's all this rubbish around here? Didn't somebody clean this up? What do you mean we're going to clean this up? Part of the plan? Yeah? And you mean we're going to start rebuilding the temple? Now that's what I'm talking about, right? Lord, rebuilding the temple. We're not going to waste time. We're going to rebuild the temple. With what? More than likely, uncarved stones and probably a lot of recycled material. And when they